All right, our keynote speaker is no stranger to Greenwood. He's attended many breakfast meetings here in the past. He is a former public defender here in Greenwood, the city of Greenwood. He went on to bigger and better things up in Greenville, including a run for US Congress, which I can't wait to hear about. And then a very scary thing happened. He opened up his own law firm. So an act of bravery, Chris Fedalei, please come on up. Welcome him back to Greenwood, everybody.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just got to say, Mayor Holland, Rico, I really, that gives me so much joy. It energizes me so much to hear about your run for office, especially as a young person. I'm going to talk a little bit about my campaign when I ran for US House at the ripe age of 26 and how difficult that was, even though I was so passionate about getting younger people out and getting younger people involved. It was the first year that, as millennials, we were supposed to be able to be the largest voting bloc, but we missed that by a long shot because people still didn't come out. And it's still a big passion of mine to know that there's real people having real success in elections in South Carolina. That gives me a lot of faith and that inspires me a lot. And so I want to give you credit, I want to give you props, and I want to thank you for what you're doing. I also want to say thank you for Bill for inviting me here. I want to say thank you to the previous chair, Mr. Charles Lewis, who was overseeing the breakfast when I was attending here. That's all right, thank you, sir. Bill flipped the order a little bit. I actually ran for office first in 2016. I don't know if y'all remember, it wasn't a great year to be running as a Democrat. I try to forget it sometimes. I try to forget the person that won office that year. But I ran for office for the US House in the 4th District, which is basically Greenville and Spartanburg counties. I'm a Spartanburg boy. I was raised there from the time I was in 1st grade. My dad was in the military before then, so we had moved around a bunch. Actually born in Hawaii. But we settled in Spartanburg when he got out of the service, and so I ran in my home district, my home US House district in the Greenville-Spartanburg area. Any remember the guy that used to represent that place? I'll give you a hint. He had a really bad haircut. Used to be a prosecutor up there. His name was Trey Gowdy. After I ran against him, Trey Gowdy was never again elected to office. Because he did. Now the reason for that is that he chose not to run again. He beat me soundly. Yeah. But I always like to use that as my kind of mark of success, is that I think he realized that the Democrats were not going to keep rolling over, even in what are considered to be safe Republican seats. And that's what one point I'm really going to want to emphasize to y'all, is that even in seats where statistically it doesn't look good, you still need to run people. You still need to run candidates. So you need to not just run anybody, you need to run the best possible candidate you can run, because it makes a difference. It makes a difference in the neighboring county, because the state Republican Party now had to give money to this House seat they didn't think they have to defend. So I really want to emphasize that to y'all. There are no lost districts. There are no races that are not worth running, period. The other thing and this is another thing that I'm very passionate about, anyone who is thinking about running, anyone who is currently running, anyone who wants to think about doing it in the future, I want to talk to you and I want to share my experience with you. I'm going to give you a little bit of snippet today, but I cannot tell you all the experiences and lessons I learned in 15 minutes. I can tell you that for sure. There's a lot of things that we did right and a lot of things that I'm very proud of, and there's a lot of things that I would have done differently. And I want every Democrat that runs in the future to run a better campaign than I ran, and I want us to continue to get stronger, and I want us as a party to continue to get stronger, because when we do that, we start picking up mayorships, we start picking up city council seats, school board seats, and then we really have a bench of candidates. That's another big problem for us. We don't have enough people holding these lower seats so that they can use them as stepping stones to get elected to office. So I definitely encourage y'all, anyone you know, anyone that inspires you, you think would make a good elected official, encourage them to run, and by all means, put them in touch with me, and I'll be happy to do everything I can to help them. I could really go through everything with you about how to run a campaign, but nitty-gritty, what got me to run is a passion for criminal justice reform. It's a huge issue to me. In my mind, it's the biggest self-inflicted wound on our country, at least in my lifetime. When I ran for office, it was part of our literature that is the biggest single domestic policy disaster since segregation. The effect on the United States, on our people and our communities is devastating. We lock up more people in the United States than China, than Russia, than Saudi Arabia. We incarcerate more people in the United States, the land of freedom, than any country on earth. And it's really not acceptable. Not to mention, we waste tons of money. We have private prisons. Anyone know that we have private prisons? We have whole companies that exist to make money, and they make money by taking people's freedom away. I ran on this issue in 2016. I'm so thankful. One of the last things that the Obama administration did was they ended all federal contracts with private prisons. Unfortunately, the vast majority of people in the United States that are incarcerated in state prisons, in the state system. Fortunately, we don't have private prisons in South Carolina. Given the state of some of our prisons, people might be tempted to think that's a good idea. But in other states like Florida, it's a thriving industry. And these are corporations. They have shareholders. They make money by filling the beds. And it's not like a hotel. It's a prison bed. So they have to make sure that people continue to be locked up. That means that these groups will oppose every instance to reform, every effort to reform our laws. Things like decriminalizing or legalizing marijuana, reducing sentencing guidelines, allowing nonviolent offenders to avail themselves of more rehabilitative type programs. These are all issues that continue to affect our country, and we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot. You know, in other parts of the country, obviously, they've made lots of really great progress. But South Carolina, no surprise to any of us here, is going to be one of the last states to come around, and my feeling is that they're not going to come around until the federal government comes around, like so many other things in South Carolina's past. So I really want to emphasize that. I mean, that's what really got me to run, and it's not the thing that they would have told me to run on. If I talked to a campaign consultant, they asked them, hey, what issues should I make part of my platform? They wouldn't have told me criminal justice reform, veterans issues, and education. You know, they would have told me more kitchen table issues. They would tell me to talk about the economy, things like that. But I talked about the things that were important to me. And that's, to me, that's the best thing that I did with my campaign, is I stuck to my issues and where I felt strong and comfortable and knowledgeable. And I was able to speak passionately on those issues. One other thing, too, because I know that Bill mentioned he wants to talk about civility, which is a very ripe topic for today. Another big achievement of the campaign was that we actually got Trey Gowdy to sit down on a stage with us and have a formal debate, which is not something that you probably get to see very often in these U.S. House seats in South Carolina. This is actually a 2-for-1. He would not debate me one-on-one. He had to bring his best friend, who you heard about earlier, Senator Tim Scott, with him to run against the nominee that we had running at that time. And I think that was because they knew, Trey Gowdy and Tim Scott knew, hey, we're tight, we have a coordinated message, we're going to present a united front here. And it's something that you have to take the opportunity. What I mean by that is, as an underdog candidate, the incumbent in a strong Republican seat, he's been elected 3 times already to this seat, he has no reason to sit on a stage with me and give me a chance to take shots at him. But what do you think I did when I was on that stage? I didn't just talk about how he was a nice guy and I was a nice guy. We took the shots that we could take. Trey Gowdy at the time in South Carolina was and still is one of the most violent states, deadliest states in the country for women, for domestic abuse. And Trey Gowdy voted against the Violence Against Women Act. And I told the crowd about that. And he did not like that. He did not like the idea that somebody was actually going to question him and was going to hold him accountable for his record. It's not something that Republicans are used to in South Carolina. So it's something that, again, coming back to the point of why you need to be running, why we need to be challenging each and every seat possible, this is why. Because when you do that, after our debate, Trey Gowdy had spent less than $100,000 on his entire race. He was going to do what he always does, which is he just stays home and he's going to win. By default, he wins. Well, Well, after that race, he dropped $500,000 on TV ads. Ended up spending over 4 times as much money as we spent on our campaign. So that's the real victory point, right? That's a $500,000 of Republican dollars that got basically wasted to keep the same result. And that's why you need to keep challenging these seats. There is no such thing as a wasted seat, as a wasted run for office. After I finished the campaign, I took a couple months to recover, as I'm sure many of you did. That was a pretty tough time. Went to our women's marches, did all that. But I always had this piece of me that felt a little bit guilty that I had talked so much about criminal justice reform on a policy level and on a national level, but I'd never actually represented somebody accused of a crime. I had never been on the front lines of criminal justice reform. And I knew if I wanted to do that where I needed to be, and that's in a public defender's office. And that's what brought me to Greenwood. That was an extremely eye-opening experience for me. And it really changed who I was and the person that I ended up becoming. Greenwood is a little bit unique. I will say in Greenwood, you know, we have a much higher crime rate per capita than many other communities of similar sizes. And there's a lot of systemic issues in Greenwood that create that, that many of you are probably even more intimately familiar with than me. But just as by way of example, the last week that I was in the Greenwood Public Defender's office, I got to watch my boss, Miss Jana Nelson. I don't know if anyone ever got to know her when she was a circuit defender here, meaning she's the head public defender. She had a client that she was defending on a murder charge. And it was a shooting that happened in an apartment parking lot. All young men, all people under 23. She was defending somebody that shot another person who was a former client of mine. The main witness who saw the shooting was another former client of mine. The intersection, the social, economic issues, the spiritual issues that create crime in our society are so interconnected. And when you have these societal level issues that are not addressed, you have environments like that, where these people that are really not so different end up really hurting each other, causing immense pain to each other and to their families. And it's something that if we don't have better policies, that's the result. If we don't have better people elected to office, that's the result. And it really stuck with me, that it showed me how big and small Greenwood was at the same time. And I moved from there to the Public Defender's Office in Greenville, which is now a bigger city, operates very differently. A lot of things about what they do are different and frankly better as far as how they run their court system. Another example about Greenwood that always struck me, everyone knows where the courthouse is, right? Right here in Uptown. Well, right next to it, that big ugly building across the street is where all the offices are, all the county offices. The solicitor's office is in there, the public defender's office is in there. So we're right across the street. Does anyone know what's in between the courthouse and the county office buildings right there? There's a statue. Anyone what that memorializes? Exactly. It's a Confederate memorial sitting right next to our courthouse, right in between the county offices and the courthouse. Right behind there is the county jail. Every day when I would walk over from my office to the courthouse, I would walk by that monument and I would think about the system that I was fighting in, and I was thinking about what message that sent to each and every person that walked into that courthouse, about what the values were of that courthouse, about what this system was, the values that it was upholding, and the systems that it was keeping in place. There's a lot of good things that have happened. There's a lot of good people that work in that system, but it's just to remind all of us that we did not drop in to the day that we're in. We are still very much, whether we like it or not, governed by the history of this place, governed by the people that came before us and decided what kind of values they wanted to display and to put up. And that's another thing that really stuck with me. You know, you can argue about whether or not there's any, my personal opinion. I'm a son of a military guy. I've always had loyalty to the United States of America, so I never had any love for the Confederacy anyways. But it really tells you something when they put that outside the courthouse, where so many people, especially I'm going to say it, people of color, are sentenced to sentences that I don't think are right. They go to prison for totally nonviolent conduct, for things that I don't think anyone should see the inside of a jail cell for one night for. And it always boiled my blood. And if I needed any extra motivation to go in and do what I needed to do to fight for my clients, I thought about that. I thought about, it's us, we're behind enemy lines. We're not just the front line, we're behind enemy lines. And especially as public defenders, you really get that sense because you're overwhelmed. About 80% of the criminal docket is represented by public defenders. So that means 4 out of 5 people that get arrested are not going to have the money to afford a private attorney, and they're going to wind up with a public defender. And I just want to say, because public defenders get such a bad reputation, that the best lawyers that I know work in the public defender's office, and they don't do it for money. I can't emphasize that enough. You have some of the most brilliant people taking on over hundreds and hundreds of cases. When I first joined the office, our caseload in Greenwood, over 200 cases per lawyer. Do you know who makes the decision about why that is, why we have so few lawyers and so many cases? That's your county level government. About half of our funds come from the state government, that's in the annual budget, but it's your county government that decides that's really the difference maker and where the disparity comes in between your solicitor's office and your public defender's office. Not to mention the solicitor's an elected official as well, right? Extremely, extremely important position to challenge. You know, I worked with all the people in that office. Suffice it to say, I think for my interest and the things that I care about, like justice, like equality, that it would be better to have a different solicitor for Greenwood. Bringing all that back, after 4.5 years as a public defender between Greenwood and Greenville counties, this past spring I launched my own law firm with another former public defender, my law partner. His name is Adam Tuma. We now have our law offices in Greenville, right next to the jail, downtown there. We go anywhere in the upstate to fight for our clients. And it's still something that I take a lot of pride in. You have to realize that when people's rights are violated, they don't have a reason to fight about it unless they suffer additionally from it. So think about it this way. If you encounter a police officer and he illegally searches you, maybe he's mean to you, maybe he mistreats you. If he lets you go, what reason do you have to pursue any action against him? It's only the people that really suffer, the people that wind up getting stuck in jail or suffer major monetary or financial losses, that have any reason to fight back and actually pursue those rights. So I know that for every case where somebody is vindicated, where somebody's rights are actually upheld, there's hundreds, if not thousands of more people that had these little small micro violations of their rights each and every day. There's a saying amongst the criminal defense bar, which is, you know, if you have rights, thank a criminal defense lawyer. Because otherwise, that is the only barricade against the almighty power of the state coming down against you and your family and your community if they want to. And if there's anything that history has taught us, especially history in South Carolina, especially history in the United States, is that the state is not always on the side of justice. And sometimes it's up to citizens to change that paradigm. With that, you know, I want to leave time for questions. In case you guys couldn't tell, I could get on my soapbox and I could go on for a long time.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to say, you know, TF Law, if you ever need help for anything, I have to do the shameless plug, Bill. It's just like from running. You can't have any, I'll tell you this, if you're going to run for office, let go of all your shame, because you are going to be calling people and you're going to be asking them for something in exchange for basically nothing. You're going to be asking for money in exchange for your goodwill, for getting me elected. You're going to be asking for volunteer hours. You're going to be asking for those in-kind donations, which are critical. When I ran for office, I was fresh out of law school. I was 26 years old. My friends didn't have the money to write me a max out check of $7,000 or $10,000. I had to say, hey, will you come out and take pictures at an event for us? Hey, will you come record like a radio ad for us? You know, will you help us design a logo for free? Those in-kind donations, you really got to use your network and squeeze everything you can. It doesn't have to be money. Anything that can help your campaign or your cause, you really got to be resourceful with that. So anyways, you ever need help, you ever need legal trouble, you ever want to talk about campaigning or politics, give me a call at TF Law up in Greenville. I'll be happy to make it down back here sometimes if I can help somebody. Thank you,
Chris. I think everybody should also be aware that congratulations or condolences, depending on your point of view, Chris has gotten engaged over the winter.
My beautiful fiance.
Enjoying.
is here with me.
So congratulations, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming down, and appreciate you giving yourself and your time today, as well as in the future, to speak with potential candidates and anybody who wants to talk criminal justice reform. I did follow a little bit of your campaign. You didn't know me, I didn't know you, but then when I saw you show up at a breakfast meeting, I was like, I know this guy from somewhere. So thank you, Chris, for coming down.
Thank you. Y'all, I'm going to beg your indulgence one more time and just let you know how lucky you are to have Bill as an active chair, and Mr. Lewis before. You did a lot of great work, but these chair positions are not paid. You give a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of your heart and soul to do good work, and so having Bill here is a blessing, and he can convince people like me to drive down from Greenville on a Saturday morning and speak. So please, appreciate it.